Thank you everyone for coming. It's great to have people here on a Thursday afternoon. I first want to say we're all very excited about what this next coming year it will have in store for us for 2021. It's going to be a real big legislative year as far as implementing in the states of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, obviously hopefully passing in New York and Connecticut. And so we're hosting today a webinar that will talk not only about the future of legalization, the future laws, the proposals that have been put forward, but also some of the markets, the business opportunities, really help you as an interested party in the cannabis industry, whether that's a business owner or whether that's an investor or an advocate, to really understand what the future has in store for us. So today we're going to be, exploring cannabis legalization in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. My name is Andrew Livingston. I'm the Director of Economics and Research at the law firm Vicente Sederberg LLP. And I have four wonderful friends, colleagues, and presenters today. So first we have Michelle Bodian. She's a senior associate in Vicente Sederberg's New York office, and she's one of the firm's leading members of their hemp and cannabinoids practice group, as well as co-chair of the grants and loans practice group. Next, to her right on the screen, we have Michael Huttner, who's a longtime friend of Vicente Sederberg, managing director of Young American Capital, a New York-based investment firm, and one of the real experts in really knowing not only some of these political futures nationally and in the Northeast, but also helping cannabis businesses navigate some of these complex dynamics. To his right, we have Jennifer Cabrera. She's co-chair of the firm's litigation and arbitration practice group and manages the firm's New York office, and is going to be covering New Jersey for today's presentation. Michelle, who I mentioned first, is going to be covering Connecticut. And then last, to my left, we have Elliot Choi. He's counsel at Vicente Sederberg and corporate chair of the firm's New York and Massachusetts offices, and he is practiced regularly involved representing cannabis clients and hemp clients in complex corporate structuring, and works as well with ancillary businesses. And he's going to be covering New York for today. So thank you so much, Michelle, Michael, Jennifer, and Elliot. And it's really great to have you all on the webinar, sharing your expertise, not only with myself. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say, but really with all of our audience and all of our guests. So to start things off, we're going to be covering a number of different issues on this presentation. First, things like what's actually happening right now in New Jersey. It seems like it's a daily news that I'm sending out to other members of the Vicente Sederberg team as far as the negotiations, right? We passed legalization in New Jersey in past November, but it's still being implemented. So will New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy sign the current bills that are on his desk, or is it going back to the drawing board for the legislature? And Jen's going to be talking about that in further detail. Will New York and Governor Cuomo, will this be finally the year? We've been talking about it for the last probably 2 to 3 years as a real serious possibility. But will the CRTA or the MRTA make it into law? And what is in those two different proposals? Elliot will be talking about that at length. Will Connecticut surprise the region by, beating New York to legalization, or even if New Jersey takes so long, beating New Jersey? And Michelle will be talking about that as well, what we're seeing there as far as what sort of things are pushing Connecticut to really consider legalization. How big are these markets and what do they look like? I'll be talking a little bit about that myself as the economist on the team. And what are the acquisition opportunities and how can businesses raise capital in this ambiguous environment? What's going to be happening federally that may make that harder or easier? And Michael's going to be talking about that as well. So, first, state overview. Where does adult use legalization stand today? We have New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. These are real opportunities in our future. And to start things off, let's get into New Jersey. And Jen Cabrera, what are we seeing so far in the state?
Thanks, Andrew. We are seeing a whole lot of political infighting at the moment in New Jersey, but we've also seen some action, which is really exciting. So, high level, voters overwhelmingly approved a constitutional ballot amendment last November by a margin of 2-1. This amendment legalizes adult use cannabis within the state of New Jersey. However, it's not self-executing. That means that it was incumbent on the legislature to actually put together a bill to implement this change. That bill was passed by the legislature last December, I want to say December 17th, and went to Governor Murphy's desk for signature. It still has not been signed. And the, I think, 45-day period after which the bill becomes a law or has to be vetoed is coming up next week. Why has it not been signed? Because Governor Murphy noticed that there was a lacuna in the bill, or lacuna to his eyes, to the legislature's eyes, it wasn't. It was intentional. There were no penalties in one version of the bill for underage possession. Governor Murphy has been pushing for civil penalties. Right now, a cleanup bill is making its way through the assembly, and word on the street is that a deal has been reached, and so hopefully something will move forward with that. Whether it's this week or it takes a little longer, we all see where this is going, and it's really just a matter of time before New Jersey manages to get this bill passed. Also, the changes we're expecting to see to the bill relate just to possession penalties. So not to the fundamental terms of the bill as it relates to cannabis businesses that are looking to operate in the Garden State. So what does the bill actually say? It's S21 in the Senate, A21 in the Assembly. It's a very long bill. It's over 200 pages. So if you have trouble sleeping, I can heartily recommend it. You will get lost in it very quickly. It contemplates 6 classes of licenses. There's cultivation, manufacturing, wholesale, distribution, retail, and delivery. There are restrictions for the first 2 years after the effective date of the bill. So let's say Governor Murphy signs the bill sometime next month in February. For the first 2 years after that, till February of 2023, there will only be 37 cultivation licenses issued. That includes the current medical operators in the state of New Jersey. So that means for the next 2 years, it's going to be intensely competitive to get a cultivation license. But New Jersey desperately needs cultivators. We have a medical marijuana program and have had one since 2010, and it's just not producing enough to even serve the medical population, which is around 90,000 people. This is a state of 9 million, and I can say that there are more than 90,000 consumers of cannabis in New Jersey, so we're going to have to increase supply somehow. And that'll happen as these cultivation licenses come online, and also as the current ATCs, as they're known in New Jersey. The current, let me back up. The medical program in New Jersey is run through alternative treatment centers. These are, and Andrew, if you could like sort of give me a little ping when I have a minute left, I'd be most appreciative so I don't keep rambling on. Alternative treatment centers. There are 12 of them licensed, of which 10 are operational across the state. Those ATCs can flip the switch and start selling to the adult use market once they meet certain requirements. So they will be the first ones selling to the adult use market. Then on top of that, the state is going to issue a certain number of cultivation licenses. As I mentioned, that includes the current ATCs. Then there are no caps on any of the other 5 license types. So manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, retailers, and delivery, no statewide cap. I'll come back to the issue of local license caps. Also, for that first 2-year period, we are going to see a ban on vertical integration. In practice, that means that you can't have a retail license and any other license type. There's a caveat here, which is micro businesses. This is a class of license that you can get for any license type. It could be a cultivator, whatever. Those micro businesses are very hard to get. There are strict residency requirements. They are not subject to the cap on cultivation. and they are able to have multiple license types, though they are not able to have retail and any other type of license. So moving on, that's what we're seeing in terms of the classes of licenses. The timing for all of this. Timing for all of this. Once the bill is passed, let's say again, middle of February, the state needs to create the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. This is a 5-member commission. 3 of the members have already been appointed. We need 2 more members to be appointed, of course. Jeff Brown, who is currently who directs the medical marijuana program through the Department of Health, is going to be coming on as executive director, along with Diana Wainu. So we have some really great heavy hitters coming in to run the commission who have experience in this area. That commission's first task, get regulations put in place. They have 6 months to do so. So again, bill passed middle of February, March, April, May, June, July, August, middle of August, we will have regulations. Within a month of those regulations being issued, the commission can start making applications available for all of these license types. So what is that actually going to be like in practice? At the state level, it'll be competitive to get a cultivation license for sure, because there's a cap. At the local level, it's going to be a bit different. So municipalities in New Jersey are going to have a bit of control over what cannabis establishments operate within their borders, which makes good sense. New Jersey, a small state, has over 560, I think, over 560 municipalities. So just a ton of them. You swing a cat and you'll be in a few different municipalities. Don't swing any cats, please. Anyway, each of those municipalities gets to decide what kind of establishment will be within their borders. They also can decide no cannabis establishments, we want out. If they decide to do that, they are bound by that decision for a certain period of time. So it's an important decision to make. They also have to make that decision, the municipalities do, within 6 months of the effective date of the bill. So again, by August, towns and cities need to decide, are we in or are we out? Any ordinance that they had relating to medical marijuana will not apply. They're going to need to pass a new ordinance to deal with this bill for it to be effective. Then, looking at these localities, a city like Newark, my hometown, they are going to have to decide how many retail dispensaries are they going to issue. And they're going to decide where they go. They'll probably divide the city up into zones. They'll decide how many grow or cultivation licenses they're going to issue. So then it becomes a very local competition in a lot of ways. Deciding, okay, I want to site my dispensary in Newark. I have to make sure that I get one of the, 10 dispensary licenses. I'm just picking a number from a hat that will be available. So we're going to see this big change from the medical system of competition at the state level to competition at the local level, which will be really quite different. So New Jersey is in for a really interesting year. There's going to be a lot of progress, and also a lot of legal administrative infrastructure just needs to be built up. What we're telling clients, honestly, is to sort of expect it to be similar in model to Massachusetts, and this is really going to be true, I think, for a lot of the northeastern states. So with that, I see that there are some questions. I'm happy to turn to those at the end, or always you can reach out to me directly if I don't get a chance to, but I will hand it back to Andrew and my neighbor in New York.
Thank you, Jen. That was a really great deep dive into New Jersey. We've got a lot to cover today, so I want to pass it next to Elliot to give us an overview of what's happening in New York, the likelihood of legalization, what is being proposed. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Jen, for that great summary of New Jersey. Hey, everyone. So I'll talk about New York. So first off, where are we right now? As many of you probably know, there's 2 different adult use bills that are under consideration. And one is from Governor Cuomo's office and is included in his annual budget proposal. This proposal is called the Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act, or the CRTA. The other is from the state legislators, sponsored by Senator Liz Krueger and Assemblywoman People Stokes, and it's a standalone bill, so it's outside of the budget. This one is known as the Marijuana Regulation Act, or the MRTA. So we have the CRTA and the MRTA. And just so you guys know, the MRTA has been introduced every year since 2013, and Cuomo's proposal has been introduced in some form since 2019. So these slides that you see here, we have two slides, so two proposals. They'll highlight some of the key aspects of the CRTA and the MRTA and some differences, although over the last few iterations, they've started to converge in certain areas. Just both contemplate a new Office of Cannabis Management, which would oversee the existing medical program, the industrial hemp program, and also the adult use program. This office would be housed within the Liquor Authority, and it would generally be comprised of an executive director and a cannabis board. So now just some big specifics about the CRTA. Again, this is Cuomo's proposal. This currently does not allow for home grow. There's also no vertical integration outside of potential micro-business licenses similar to what Jen described in New Jersey, and potentially for the registered organizations, which are the medical operators in New York. The vertical limitation, just so folks know, is either you can basically have to pick a lane, the cultivation, distribution, production, or retail. So it's those two lanes in New York right now, and then this is similar in the MRTA as well. The cannabis board under Cuomo's proposal, unsurprisingly, would all be appointed by the governor, and he would also pick one as the executive director. The CRTA includes a local opt-out. It's a little different from the MRTA. In the CRTA, if you're a town with more than 100,000 people, you have to actively adopt legislation to opt out, and the deadline for that is the end of this year. On the social equity aspect in Cuomo's proposal, and this is a change from last year, there's now a specified amount of cannabis tax revenue that will be used for social equity programs. The amount starts at $10 million and goes up to $50 million per year. And you'll note that the term amount is different because the MRTA uses percentage. So as noted, the CRTA is included in the budget, and so the budget, the New York fiscal year starts on April 1st, so the budget is typically passed around then. So if it's going to be the CRTA or even the MRTA and it's going to be passed with the budget, we should know by April. The latest version of the CRTA, just what's been missing in there, it removed the licenses for delivery and on-site consumption, as well as home grow. But our understanding is that this doesn't necessarily preclude these license types from coming into existence in New York. It's just that this will have to be done through the regulations and not via the legislation. Also, there's no explicit expansion of the medical program in the CRTA, and an additional aspect too is that the CRTA imposes tax rates based on THC potency, which is a little bit unique and it's kind of hard to figure out the effective tax rate. But the studies that came back so far show the effective tax rate under the CRTA is somewhere around 20%. The next slide here, Andrew, I got that. All right. So then the other proposal I mentioned is the MRTA or the MRTA. So some key aspects here. The MRTA does allow for home grow. Similar to the CRTA, there is restrictions on vertical integration. Again, you have to pick a lane, cultivation, production, or retail. And the MRTA does include the same concepts with the micro business license, which could potentially be vertically integrated. The cannabis board appointments under the MRTA would be split amongst the governor, the president of the Senate, and the speaker of the Assembly, and the executive director would be nominated by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So there's a lot more state legislator involvement with the Office of Cannabis Management under the MRTA. There is still also a local opt-out, but under the MRTA, it's done via a public referendum, not via just legislation adopted at the county level. As mentioned, the social equity provisions on the MRTA call for 50% of the cannabis tax revenues to be used for social equity programs. So this is, and the idea here, so the amounts under the CRTA were, 10 million up to 50 million. And just to give you guys a sense of what this percentage means, it's expected that once the adult use market's up and running in New York, it'll be about 350 million annual in tax revenue. So the MRTA is calling for about, 175 million per year to be used for social equity programs. As far as timing, as mentioned, the MRTA is a standalone bill, but it doesn't necessarily preclude it from being incorporated into the budget and passed with that in April. But otherwise, it would have to kind of go through the regular state legislative process here, the Assembly, the Senate, and then ultimately be signed by the governor. Similar to the CRTA, there is also no expansion of the medical program explicitly, and the tax rates under the MRTA are still around the 20-25% rate. Now, I keep mentioning tax rates because one important item to consider for New York is the existing legacy market. As New Yorkers, and I'm one of them, are all too proud to tell you, New York, in particular New York City, represent the largest cannabis markets in the world, even though we don't necessarily have adult use of cannabis here legalized yet. So it's important to get the tax rate right, because as we've seen in California, if the tax rate's too high, the legacy market will remain in effect. So that's kind of where I'll end on the MRTA. So I know, because we got to keep moving along here.
Thank you, Elliot. That was really interesting. It's always a little confusing when you have two different bills with different acronyms, and they're similar but slightly different. But I just hope that the governor and the legislature are able to come to an agreement this year. We can actually pass cannabis in what would likely be the second largest metropolitan cannabis demand area in the world, maybe after LA, but it's hard to know. Whether or not, I know from experience, I have a lot of friends in New York who definitely like to buy cannabis. So they want to get it legally. So Michelle, let's touch on Connecticut, right? People aren't talking as much about Connecticut as they are about New York and New Jersey, but there's also proposals there. And, I know it's been something that the governor has talked about for a little bit. So Michelle, will you touch on what's happening in the nutmeg state?
Well, now that you outed the nutmeg state, sure. So I don't have as much to say. Unfortunately, Connecticut right now in the race of the tri-state is in third, solidly in third. So the governor has talked in his State of the State about the importance of legalization. And right now, Connecticut's really looking at it purely for tax revenue and bringing that income generating business to the state. And so right now in Connecticut, we really have nothing to look at and nothing to talk about. So while I could end there, I'll keep talking for a couple more minutes. The administration is shopping around right now a proposal to various agencies for feedback. Then from that point, that draft bill will become publicly available in his budget. And the budget usually comes out around mid to end of February. So we do expect it in a little bit. And then at that point, we'll actually be able to dig in and see a copy of it. Last year, Connecticut did try the governor again through legislation to have a standalone bill. It's pretty comprehensive. It had a lot of similar provisions to what New York and New Jersey are doing. First and foremost, establishing a 9-member commission that would then be implementing and overseeing this. And then the legislature itself did try to have separate standalone bills that ultimately were not successful. But everyone in Connecticut is enthusiastic and excited about this, and certainly they're feeling the pressure from New Jersey and New York to come online, and they don't want to miss out on these opportunities. So too soon to say in Connecticut, but stay tuned because there's definite interest.
Thanks, Michelle. I really hope that we have a trifecta move forward as far as legalization. Friends in the area really want and deserve cannabis, and it will be to their loss if people have to, go into New York City or go into New Jersey to buy their cannabis, or up to Massachusetts, because it's not like it's going to be that far for Connecticut residents to buy cannabis. So, let's get into, obviously there are some regional considerations. All of the different governors have met in the past before the pandemic. You guys may remember this. This was what feels like 5 years ago, but probably actually was about a year ago when the governors were meeting and sort of discussing how to move forward. I'll touch on each person a little bit quickly and then get into, what's happening in the investment space in the future, and passing over to Michael. But Jen, you have any quick thoughts on how much coordination is there actually happening between New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut? Are they going to have the same tax rates, or does that not seem like it could be the case?
It's hard to say. I think it might be quite similar to their COVID coordination, where they are coordinating, but in practice, they're going their own way with a lot of these things. They have different tax rates. New Jersey's ballot initiative capped the tax rate at the sales tax, so it's 6.675%. Then this commission has the option to put an additional discretionary tax on top of it, but it's probably going to be lower than New York and Connecticut. Beyond that, I imagine there will be a bit of coordination. These states have a track record of working well together.
Yeah, Elliot, there was recently actually a regulators kind of, I don't want to call it an industry group, but a regulators roundtable that came together that's spearheaded by some of those individuals in New York. Do you think that they're going eventually coordinate and there's going to be a single regulatory agency for all three, or do you think it's always kind of going to have this state by state dynamic similar to alcohol?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so, as you mentioned, we do know the regulators are speaking to each other. They've had, obviously many informal conversations, but they recently formed the Cannabis Regulators Association to kind of create a formal group. And so, they speak regularly. I know they think they just had a meeting recently, and there's definitely kind of coordination on certain issues, including things like, child safety, packaging, labeling, to make sure that the requirements are consistent across the states and don't really give anyone a competitive advantage necessarily from starting in one state or the other. But I think one interesting thing that I heard recently is that, a lot of people ask about the timing and the pressures from one state to the other, especially after New Jersey passed the ballot initiative. And, my thinking had been that, the states would like to try to sync up on the timing to prevent, Andrew, what you described earlier, people from Connecticut kind of going over to other states to get product just because Connecticut hasn't legalized yet. But obviously everyone's looking at the revenues and the state budget shortfalls, and so there is kind of an incentive to be first to the market, especially considering the close geographical proximity for all the states here. So I do know that the regulators are keeping that in mind and looking at each other's state and looking to try to go live first. I do think it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, including how the differing tax rates across the states maybe over time kind of meld together along with the prices paid by consumers to again prevent kind of one state from kind of developing a market share at the expense of others.
Thanks, Elliot. So let's pass it over to Michael. What are we seeing in far as the investment world in cannabis in 2021? Both at the federal level, in the tri-state area, what's been on your plate and what do you see in the future?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for having me, including me here today. I'm a big fan of Vicente Sederberg. I've known them for, I think, when they were just a handful of attorneys a decade ago, and it's great to see their success. And as I've always, when I get asked a lot about legal questions, I always think of them as the law firm that people go to when the lawyers go to their law firm when they can't figure it out themselves. So they are really the experts, and I'm honored to be a part of this. I work with Young America Capital, which is a 68-person investment bank, a broker-dealer based out of Mamaroneck, New York. And I joined about 3.5 years ago, where we just had about 3 or 4 of us working on cannabis. And now there's about 15 of us that work on cannabis on a regular basis. And this year, what's nice is we've really had the team break out areas that they're experts in. So if there's any questions that I can't answer today, we have specific folks that are experts on New York, on New Jersey, as well as Connecticut, and I'm happy to connect people with them. To start, I guess, in the big picture on the cannabis space, and then a little bit later today, I'll go more specifically to the tri-state. I'm bullish, and I'm bullish on the market. I think we're all in this market's going to take off this year. And let me just, I'm one of those people that like list. I'll kind of give you my top 10 reasons why I'm bullish, and happy to answer any questions later. The first really it goes back to the summer of 2019. As many of you remember, that was the summer where the publicly traded cannabis companies took a big hit, largely on the CSE, but it really was a correction. I think a lot of them were overvalued, and there was a lot of hype. And of course, it wasn't fun for some of us to go through that. But now that we've done that, there's been quite a correction in the market, and I think that'll be a good thing for everybody. Second, the companies that we've been working with are getting more sophisticated with their financials, their auditing, their accounting, their 280E compliance. So I think overall it's a much less, depending on the state, a much less crazy area to invest in than it was even just a few years ago. Third, as everybody knows, a lot of these states across the country designated cannabis as an essential service last year during the start of COVID, and that's helped cannabis across the country, not just in the obvious states like here in Colorado and elsewhere. The fourth is there have been most of our clients have experienced record sales during COVID. If anything, their sales went up during COVID. Certainly, there's some delivery and distribution seems to have really skyrocketed, while stores, but even the the individual stores and dispensaries, they've also had record months in the past 6-8 months. So fifth, as was mentioned earlier, the state and local governments are at a huge hole because of the cost of COVID and all the things that go along with it. So there's a bigger demand than ever for tax revenue. So I think you're going to see a push in these 3 states and others this year to fill that, what's only getting to be a bigger and bigger hole. Next is just stating what people already know, which is last year was a big year for legalization. You saw Arizona, you saw Montana, Mississippi, South Dakota, Vermont through the legislature. And then, of course, as was mentioned here, it looks like there's a likelihood that it's, I guess my 7th point is this year, which is, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, possibility in Pennsylvania, New Mexico, even Texas is considered expanding its cannabis markets. So I think this year is going to be huge. Just to wrap up, number 8, what you're really seeing is there's becoming a real play and focus on intellectual property, on IP, and that you're starting to finally see brands that people recognize. And certainly some of these brands are largely because they're big multi-state operators that we have in the tri-state area. And as time goes through, toward this year and next year, you're going to really see an emergence of, in the importance of intellectual property and specific brands that become household names. 9th, the elections from last November, we've seen at Young America a huge uptick, just literally since the election, and even more so just in the past few, since Biden was sworn in. I think people. I'm not sure there's going to be we can go into more detail on that. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge number of federal changes this year, but the investor sentiment and a lot of people doing business, I think, feel just more comfortable that there's nothing that's going to go crazy under the new administration and the newly elected Congress. And then the last item I would just say, and kind of a shout out, is thanks to the good work of Cannabis Trade Federation, which I know the folks at Vicente have been really helpful with, as long as some of the other associations and nonprofits like Marijuana Policy Project, MPP, Last Prisoner Project, and others. Thanks to their hard work and their continued work, I think we're going to see a lot of progress this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. It was really interesting to hear about, just the different things that we got to think about when it comes to investing in cannabis businesses. And what are the different dynamics that are rapidly affecting these businesses from different points. So I'm going to next jump into a little bit of an evaluation of the tri-state market of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, looking at a little bit of the existing data that we have as far as sales, patients, and everything else. So Connecticut, we don't really have sales data, but in New York and New Jersey, we do. New York, this data comes from tax records, and New Jersey, this comes from their annual updates of volume of sales combined with their average prices, and then some projections for 2019 and 2020. So sadly, the New Jersey and New York market, despite having combined tens of millions of people between the two of them, have some of the smaller medical cannabis markets. Really, this is in part both caused by not a huge number of patients per capita, but it's predominantly caused by much smaller per patient purchases. So typically you see per patient purchases per month at around $200 to $300 per month. In total, you end up with about $2,500 a year per patient. In New York, those per patient purchases are only about $70 per patient per month. And that's largely because patients aren't purchasing all of their cannabis demand from these legal and regulated sources. It could be that they're only buying some of their concentrate or topical or other infused products. It could be that they're just too expensive and they don't go all that frequently. So that being said, with an expansion in the number of available options, types, as well as locations, we'll not only see an increase in the number of people being able to access these markets, but hopefully an increase in per consumer and eventually per patient purchases as well. So let's talk about some key market statistics. Oftentimes when we look at this, we look at patient to population ratios, and we're seeing, back when I started doing this, Colorado was one of the high points, and we had about maxed out in 2012 or so at about 2.1% of the population being patients. And I thought, 2, maybe 3% was the apex. Like, we're not going to get higher than that. Obviously, was wrong, because Oklahoma has about 9% or more of its population are patients, and Arizona just broke 4%. So Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, we're all dealing with less than about 1.5% of the population being patients. New York is the lowest at about 0.71%. That being said, we're still seeing growth. They still continue to grow, even though the number of locations hasn't really grown significantly in many of these states. And prices are still really pretty high. The next thing to look at is estimated adult past month consumers. So this data comes from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which is a federal government survey done by SAMHSA, which is a sub-department of Health and Human Services. And they look at, past month cannabis use trends, and we can just multiply this by the total number of adults. We're dealing with about 500,000 past month consumers in Connecticut, over 800,000 in New Jersey, and about 2.2 million in New York. That is a huge number of consumers, and that represents, as Elliot was saying, one of the largest black markets in the world. And it will take a lot in order to transmit, those consumers over. Think about how many different places there are to buy coffee or alcohol in New York. We need a similar number of places to buy cannabis, because, while it's relatively easy to travel around New York, no one wants to wait online, for hours outside just to get some cannabis. When right now, many of them are getting it delivered to their doorstep in not so legal forms. So how many current operators do we have in this industry right now in these 3 respective states? So in Connecticut, we have 18 dispensaries, 4 producers, which includes cultivation and manufacturing. There's a regulatory cap currently of these 4 producers, but actually it's statute. You could have up to 10. They just haven't issued those. In New York, these are these registered organizations, which is the medical marijuana businesses. And each one of them is vertically integrated, allowing up to 4 different retail dispensing locations. Currently, though, there's just 38 open, as 2 of those vertically integrated operators have only opened 3 of their 4 permissible dispensary locations. And in New Jersey, we have 9 businesses. Again, these are vertically integrated. Some of them have more locations than others. I think one of them has 3, some of them have 2. So there's 12 dispensaries location. They're all vertical. And as Jennifer was mentioning, there's many that have been pending, hopefully coming down the pipeline, but that has been tied up in litigation for some time. All right, now I'm going to pass it back and forth a little bit to some of the other panelists. So, what do we see in New Jersey, Jen, as far as anticipated impacts on current medical operators? Are they going to be able to transition? Are they going to be the only ones that are vertically integrated? Kind of what's the dynamic here? How much of an advantage or a head start might they be getting?
Thanks. I think there's a definite advantage to the ATCs that are operating. They will be the only ones that are vertically integrated, and they'll be the first ones that can flip the switch to selling to the adult use market. The one point I do want to just touch on again is, and most of the people from New Jersey listening know this, that the 2019 RFA was never decided, and there are 24 licenses there, of which I believe 4 were vertically integrated. When that RFA is finally decided, and it's been held up in litigation, and those licenses awarded, those applicants, those winners, will be the same, treated the same as the ATCs. They will be grandfathered in as well. So they won't get started as quickly as the current operating ATCs, because they're not operational. They don't even have their permits yet, but they'll definitely be able to take advantage of that early advantage.
Thanks, Jen. That was, interesting. Obviously, if we do see additional licenses held up in lawsuits, like we've been seeing in some other states, or in administrative issues as far as issuing those, that length of time could get extended as far as some of the priorities for those existing operators. It really just depends upon what that implementation looks like. That being said, thankfully we have some businesses. So when legalization does happen, there may be lines, but people will still be able to get cannabis. Elliot, New York, what's up with the governor's proposal? How does that affect existing registered organizations? Same sort of questions about vertical integration, any priority as far as operations or timeline?
Hey, thanks, Andrew. So both the CRTA and the MRTA both contemplate allowing registered organizations to potentially, obtain adult use licenses. It's not guaranteed or mandatory. So in that case, if they do get adult use licenses, the registered organizations would be allowed to remain vertically integrated. So they would be outside of the restrictions for your typical adult use operator. In addition, the CRTA, Cuomo's proposal, includes a potential auction mechanism where the registered organizations could enter into some competitive bidding process in order to be able to flip the switch earlier. And I understand part of the motivation there is that, obviously establishing the new Office of Cannabis Management, moving all the hemp, the hemp program, the medical program under there, these all require costs. And the idea is that this potential auction process could bring in funds, immediately that the cannabis program in New York could use to set up other things. I just want to touch on quickly. I know, and Andrew kind of touched on this, that the medical program in New York has kind of been described as restrictive, limited, and the like. And I think that's a little misleading. I think it's more legit than you see in other states where the qualifying conditions and the products I think are more specifically tailored to medical patients. And so I know there's a question in the chat about and obviously the slide about the impact, and New York regulators in particular are definitely focused on maintaining the medical market distinct from the adult use market and not having to get it swallowed up as we've seen in other states. And so the idea there being that the medical tax rates would be lower to allow for better prices for legit medical patients. And then there's also a push in New York to try to get laws requiring the insurance companies to pay for medical products for qualifying patients. So I just wanted to kind of note that for the medical program in New York.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, insurance coverage would be huge, right? Obviously, right now, everyone's paying out of pocket for all of their medical needs under medical cannabis, and it can get expensive, particularly in states where you're paying for a more complex sort of medical product that requires a lot more intellectual property and development. And those products can get expensive to produce and then expensive to purchase. Michelle, do we have anything to add on Connecticut? Should we just jump from Connecticut? Because right now it's a little bit of
too soon to say.
So let's then jump in investing in the tri-state. Michael, what's been on your mind? What have people been talking to you about as far as interest, potential opportunities, acquisitions, new licenses? Where can money be deployed?
Sure. So this is thank you. So we have been working. We've been working with clients and companies in all three of the states. And here's the short of it. The not so good news, which I guess I'll start with first, is that you've really, as discussed, you have a limited number of operators at this point in each of these states. You've only got you saw the numbers earlier, Connecticut with 18 dispensaries, with New York, they could have up to 4 each, up to 40 total. And in New Jersey, there's really just, I think, 9 businesses, of which there's about 12 dispensaries open. Some people have asked about M&A and investing. Most of these operators, unfortunately, certainly with New York, all but one of them is a multi-state operator. So you can invest, as most of these are publicly traded on the CSE. You can invest that way, but to have a private placement, it's fairly limited, and there's not any real the acquisition opportunities. We actually are just wrapping up one in New Jersey where the price tag for a license in any of these states is going to run upwards of 80, 90, $100 million or more because it's so limited. So to actually obtain a license, it's very that's the not so good news. It's not, unless you have some relationship with one of the MSOs. Or somebody in there, it's pretty tough and pretty challenging. We expect that to change, as mentioned earlier. The good news, I guess I would say, is that these markets are, as referenced, completely underserved. And where there's a real opportunity right now is in the ancillary market. They're not controlled by and by ancillary, I mean all of the businesses and services that go around a growing emerging market. And I would put all three of these states that they're literally growing by the week. And there's going to be anything from supplies that, non-plant touching companies that supply what consumers want to consume these cannabis, to different businesses that make their money off of, ancillary, making their money off of these businesses. So I would say, look to, for people listening, I would say look to where there's opportunities that they've seen in other states that are more mature, that they can invest in ancillary businesses that are just getting going. But in terms of the big picture, if anybody's interested in chatting more about any particular state, myself and a couple experts on my team would be happy to go into more detail. But as I mentioned there, because of the limited nature of this, they're in the same category as, let's say, Florida, where you have literally not many licenses available, and now that they're available, they're pretty expensive. Now, the two ways that'll change is, one is the licenses will come down in price potentially, although they are so limited. In Florida, for example, we've handled two Florida licenses. The first was $65 million, and 2 years later, the license came down to about $35 million. And then so I think that's it in the ancillary space. So thanks. If there's any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Michael. That was really fascinating. I wish I had $100 million to throw at a cannabis business. Sadly, I do not. But I know that there will be hopefully some more opportunities, some more entrepreneurialism that will appear in these new states. We don't have that many adult use legalization states that are super, super restrictive. So the real question is, what's next? Let me go back for a second. We're really looking at what is next. What is the opportunities that we need to be preparing for this legalization? So where does that leave some of these businesses? As far as financing, as far as acquisition, capital raise, with partnership opportunities. Elliot, do you have any kind of recommendations for individuals that are maybe interested in kind of this next chapter in New York? What sort of things do they need to do to prepare for what this legalization is coming up?
Yeah. So Andrew, so obviously this is the kind of the question we get asked a lot, especially, with the, as you said, the kind of the legalization not happening quite yet. So, unfortunately, as the saying goes, the devil's going to be in the details, and we won't know those details until we see regulations and licensing applications come out. But obviously, there's many things, people looking at the cannabis industry could do today to start teeing up for those details. Including, as you said on the slide, is building out a team, kind of engaging with the local community. As mentioned, there are local features to both all these legislations, including the local opt-out in New York and the potential for local licenses in New Jersey. So it's really important to be engaged with the local communities and the politicians there to see, if where you intend to try to put your cannabis business, are they going to locally opt out? What kind of local licensing process are they going to have there if they're going to have one? So that kind of also goes to the real estate. It's always, you can start looking at real estate properties to figure out, is this what is this property zoned for? There are certain requirements that are already in the legislations, like in New York, you can't be within 500 feet of a school or a religious institution. It's very similar to where you can put a liquor store, so you can start looking at things like that. Although I would definitely not advise, acquiring the real estate until you know for certain the zoning and more additional details. And related to that, I'm a corporate transactional attorney, and I always tell people to really start getting your financing in order and start getting your investors lined up as soon as you can. Capital is, hard to come by for the startups in here. And so it's always good to get started on that as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Elliot. So, in Connecticut, while we don't really have as much information about what might be coming to the table as far as legalization, Michelle, is there anything that, businesses can do or interested parties can do to help move the ball forward, beyond talking to their legislators, talking to the governor? Is there anything that you could do as a business before we even really know what that groundwork is going to look like?
Sure. Obviously, the earlier and the more often you could advocate for what you want, the better. And so, doing that both municipal level, because as we're seeing in New York and New Jersey, no matter what happens at the state level, there is going to be something happening at the local level. So the opportunity to get involved now, start talking to your mayor, and then going all the way up through to the governor's office to start advocating for what you want ultimately to see in the bill. Because while there's nothing quite yet to be talking about, that's also an advantage. You can have the opportunity to advocate for what would be best for yourself and your business, and do that now before it's too late.
Thanks, Michelle. That was really interesting. So actually, before we jump into questions in the chat, I actually want to go back. Jen, we're closest in New Jersey, or at least we think we might be closest in New Jersey. If you're a business right now, what's the best thing to do? Let's say, obviously, if you're an existing ATC, it's getting ready, building out your cultivation facility. I saw you answered a question that said ATCs can have up to 150,000 square feet, and micro businesses could have 2,500 square feet. What should both the businesses that are currently operating as well as new potential entrepreneurs be considering in order to prepare for legalization in the Garden State?
Yeah, so we're working with a lot of pre-licensing clients in New Jersey and New York, honestly, right now. And because our firm is unique in that we will help our clients write the application and win their license. So we can do that whole side of things, the merit licensing side of the work. So we want our clients to come to us as soon as possible. And what we want to see is that you have a location secured within, we'll go through all of this with our clients, but making sure there are no bank loans on it. And also getting your team in order. Like, it's everything that Elliot said, but it's really just come to us earlier so that we can help you get everything in place. And also so that you're not contacting your legislatures left, right, and center. Maybe you just need to hire a lobbyist, like figure out who the right people to talk to. This is a capital intensive industry. So you're going to have to spend some money. You want to spend it wisely. So we can help you do that. That was my pitch.
Thank you, Jen. That was a great pitch. So many of the questions that have been posed have already been answered. I saw Elliot and Jen and others really shooting off some answers, but let me try to get to some that I don't think have been covered as much. So we had a number of different questions about vertical integration, about existing priorities. Obviously, we're dealing with a situation in which in New Jersey and New York, both of the existing operators in those two different states are all vertically integrated. In New York, Elliot, I think you mentioned the new businesses will not be vertically integrated. Is that correct? I know that was in one of the past proposals in previous years.
So there's the concept in both the CRTA and the MRTA about a micro business license, and it's potentially that type of micro business license could be vertically integrated. Those details will be fleshed out in the regulations. And then, I know people always like to ask about canopy size, and unfortunately the proposed bills don't put a canopy size onto the potential micro business licenses, but that's potentially one avenue for new operators to become vertically integrated. Obviously, you can require an existing registered organization, and then hope that the regulations will allow you to flip the switch, and you can remain vertically integrated if you're already existing registered organization.
Got it. So not only we don't yet know what the final language will look like when it passes, but then obviously there's always regulatory details that will fill in those gaps as far as production management, license caps, and all of that. So Jen, is that a similar sort of dynamic? The existing operators will be able to stay vertically integrated. There won't be vertically integration for some of these other businesses, but then the micro businesses will be vertically integrated. What's the proposed dynamics in New Jersey as far as that vertical integration?
In New Jersey, vertical integration is reserved for the current ATCs and any ATCs that come in through the 2019 RFA. And I apologize for the word soup, acronym soup, but that's where we are. New Jersey micro businesses cannot be vertically integrated. However, in New York, the collectives can be vertically integrated.
Got it. So that's interesting there. So obviously, without vertical integration, wholesale could be a big deal. Do you see that playing out similar to what we see in in Nevada or in Michigan where they're required? Is it going to be a big deal like with alcohol, or is it going to kind of be like what we see in California where people get their own distribution licenses and then kind of self-distribute?
That's a great question. So you can't have a wholesale license in New Jersey, as well as, I believe, I think there's a restriction on having wholesale and another kind of license. You may be able to have a wholesale and distribution, but not also cultivation. So they're really trying to put some people in just that lane. It's also not clear yet how wholesale and distribution licenses are going to work together. Like, these are distinct license types and they can do very similar things. We're just going to need to see the regulations and like what the commission has in mind there. But New Jersey, and honestly New York as well, are really trying to create like this supply chain that's very structured and where everyone has a very specific role to play within it.
Thank you, Jen. That was really fascinating. So we're just about ending on time. I want to thank everyone so much for coming to this webinar, for putting your questions forward. If you have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Our emails are here, at least from the VS side, on the screen. If you'd like Michael's email as well, please feel free to reach out to one of us, or we can provide that. And if you're looking to buy or sell or just invest in the cannabis industry, there is really no one better than talking to Michael Huttner on these sorts of issues. I want to thank all of you for attending today. I hope if it is crazy snowy and cold in the place that you live, our information was able to inform your brain and maybe warm your heart. And with that, I'll just say I'm looking to 2021 more than almost any other year. We've got legalization being implemented in many of the states that it passed this last November, and many more states will be facing a difficult economic environment. And we all know that cannabis sales really rocketed in 2020. And I think many of those legislators are looking to this last year and saying, I think I need a little bit more tax revenue. And I think my consumers need a little bit more stress relief. So with that, cannabis just might be the answer to both of those problems. Thank you guys so much for attending today. And I look forward to speaking with many of you in the future.